So good morning, everyone. You said it so well. You said it so well. I mean, that is what we're here for, right, today? Let's keep this interesting. It is the morning, so I have been known when I see people nodding out to ask you to do a little Tai Chi or yoga. I'm a martial artist for many, many years, and I have made people kind of stand and stretch and things like that. But I do want to say what an honor it is to be here today at the University of Texas Austin. And it's fitting that we're here at this campus. This is, unlike my college days, I actually was here on time for the seminar, but I am excited about being here today because this school has made some very significant contributions to the area of commercial space, and so I really, when this opportunity came about, I really wanted to take advantage of it. So first, I've got to switch gears here just a little bit because something has just happened, so I've got to get a little somber here for a moment, right? So let me begin by saying, and I can tell you that as a pilot who has flown cargo, I've been a FedEx pilot for 32 years, that the Atlas Air accident, not very far from here, right, cargo airplane, what a terrible tragedy. It's very deeply touching to me. The feelings go deep because I've been one of the voices out there to really highlight the dichotomy between the safety, security, and flight time, duty time rules that exist for the passenger carriers versus the cargo carriers. They are not the same rules. And for one reason or another, those risk factors that make up both of those groups are significantly different. How different? Well, now, I will tell you this. Flying is the safest, and you'll hear it in a little while, form of transportation ever known to man, all right? You're safer getting on that airplane than you are driving to the store, right, to get a pack of smokes. Seriously, the risk differences are so much. Let's just, for example, I know I'm going a little off script. My team don't get nervous here, but I have to do this. If you looked at all flying as a pie shape, 93% of the flying is done by passengers and 7% by cargo. If you change the risk factors, right, even though they make up the same fantastic numbers that I'm about to share with you here in a little while, in terms of the safety of the system, if you switch them, and we did 93% of the flying, in other words, cargo did it, you'd have 276 accidents in 10 years. Something really wrong with that picture. Something really wrong with that picture. Now, I think it's the lack of a science-based flight time, duty time rule that overlays those other risk factors, that maybe heightens those risk factors, perhaps. That's my hunch. Because problems at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. are significantly different than they are at 3 in the afternoon. I mean, dealing with those kinds of things. So my hope is, and that one of my targets for my 4-year term is to remedy that. Now, we were in, got to hand it to the FAA. We were in the rule. We were in the new FAR 117 rule, which, if you don't know, was the game changer that finally put science into the rule and studied circadian rhythms, windows of circadian lows, those kinds of things. We were carved out of that rule on the basis of a cost-benefit analysis, making determinations that perhaps the lives of a few crew members didn't equal the lives of a full load of passengers. Well, that is a significant difference, but some of the facts they used to do that were skewed. So anyway, I needed to get that out, but I will say this. We have at the largest, she said, the largest non-governmental safety organization in the world, safety, security, pilot assistance, and jump seats, okay? 400 and something pilots, experts, working together with a full-time staff. Consisting in that pilot assistance portion is critical incidents response. And I always say that you could judge the character of an organization by the way it comes to its members in need. And let me tell you, folks, these folks do all this type of work, HIMSS, human intervention motivation studies, professional standards, aeronautical, and critical incidents response. They do this under the radar because typically if you need those services, this is not something, you're eager to share. It's usually a tough time in your life. But these folks do an amazing job of circling the wagons for our pilots. So, our leaders and personal staff have reached out, like I said, to offer assistance to the families that are involved in this. And we did have an ALPA pilot, an Airline Pilots Association pilot, on the jump seat on this accident. So it's hitting home. And this pilot was just about to leave Mesa Airlines and go to his dream job at United Airlines. And he has a wife and 2 children, one brand new child, just born. So tough one. And the shock of the loss is made even greater because, aviation-like accidents, I'm telling you, they are rare, all right? The good news is that finally, through the commercial air safety team that I'll mention here in a little while, they've lowered the risk rate so phenomenally right now over the years, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Again, off script, sorry. But the reason for that now is that they're finally looking at cargo, saying, hey, we want to reduce this rate by another half. When I tell you these numbers, it's pretty startling. It's pretty amazing. So to do that, they have to get through cargo. And that, to me, is hopeful. And we're very much involved in that. The Airline Pilots Association is extremely involved in that effort, and we will succeed. It has to be done. So the first American to ever orbit the Earth, who was that? Anybody know? John Glenn, right? John Glenn. He was a Marine Corps pilot, if you notice the haircut. I myself, Marine. Now, in describing his time as a pilot, like any pilot would do, he said, I liked flying. When I got into it, I loved it. And I found that I was good at it. And I'm not modest about the fact that I was a good pilot. Sounds like a standard thing you'd hear from a pilot, right? So, just so many jokes abound that I could get into about that fact. But, well, we're all type A's, right? I mean, we have to. It's a matter of survival for us, right? I don't think you want a pilot that's not type A. So, and I certainly can understand John Glenn's love of flying. In my 40 years of flying, I can't believe 40 years has transpired. I've flown small civilian aircraft, a KC-130 in the Marine Corps, and 727 DC-10 and an A300, both in commercial and cargo ops. Again, 32 years at FedEx, so 40 altogether with the Marine Corps. So as ALPA's president, right, it's my privilege here today to represent 61,000 pilots at 33 airlines in the United States and Canada. It's a lot of pilots. The Airline Pilots Association was founded on safety. For more than 88 years, safety has been among our central priorities. In fact, anybody know the motto of our association? I wouldn't think you would, but it's schedule with safety. It's been that motto over the 88 years. In fact, we always, like in that, we have a saying that we say safety is really embedded in our DNA over the evolution of our experience of that 88 years. And here's why. Because in the early days of commercial flight, working as an airline pilot was pretty damn dangerous. It was very dangerous. And despite being skilled aviators, more than half of the original founders of our union died in accidents. That has a way of sticking with you. Because those early pilots were often pushed sometimes to fly when it wasn't safe to do so. When you have that fourth stripe, there's a lot of responsibility that goes with that. Each time we take an airplane, before we put you and your families in that airplane, we make a decision whether or not because somebody told us it was safe, but because with our experience and our knowledge and the information that we have at hand, which is fairly robust, we make that decision. So essentially, schedule for safety for us is sheer survival, right? Our primary responsibility is to get you safely from point A to point B, safely and securely, and that's what we do. So, in fact, in the Airline Pilots Association, there's 3 main goals. Safety, right? Safety and security, then pilot representation, and then future of the profession. What does that see? What do you see in that symbology? It's that we take safety ahead of representation, so we're in effect saying the money doesn't matter. The work rules don't matter. What matters is safety. Because what good is all that other stuff if you don't make it? And you can't get an airplane from point A to point B. So it's important to us, really important to us. Now, so before becoming ALPA president, last 4 years, I was the first vice president, second in command at ALPA, and it was my privilege of overseeing the ALPA's air safety organization that I just mentioned, the Safety, Security, Pilot Assistance, and Jump Seat Program. And I led over 400 pilot volunteers and professional staff. We have over 350 professional staff members that help us do our jobs, give us adult supervision, I always say. in our union safety work that has contributed to making flying safer. ALPA is involved in literally everything that happens in the airspace and everything that happens, all the equipment that goes in our airplanes, all the training that takes place, you name it, we're involved in it. And now I'm glad to say, and we'll get into why, but I'm really excited about commercial space. And can't wait to do more. In fact, we've got a lot on the board right now. So, in fact, that safety record that I mentioned with that exception that I just told you about cargo that we have to work on, I would put this record against any safety record in the history of humankind. No doubt about it. I mean, you compare that safety record to something like railroads or highways or anything like that, we're far ahead. So, and it's that foundation of that record in which ALPA approaches commercial space. So we look through that lens. That's our lens. And like I said, I'm truly excited about commercial space. I'm pumped. For me, it harkens back to when I was a little boy, a long, long time ago, sitting cross-legged in front of the black and white TV, watching the black and white images, about all the types of space travels as we, went into the beyond, right? I mean, it was really exciting. To me, spaceflight represents today, for me, everything that made America exceptional. Our pioneering spirit, our can-do attitude, as a Marine, I love that, our independence, our dreams for tomorrow, and for me, folks, from the heart, our hope for tomorrow, and our hope for humanity. This is important stuff we're all doing. And, so when I think about commercial space, I don't see a new entrant. It's unlike drones, right, or unmanned aerial systems. It's not a new entrant. It's just that the capability of commercial space is advancing so quickly, right? What I see more is the evolution of humankind. So the only thing new, again, is just the ever-expanding capabilities, thanks to many of the people in this room. It's fascinating what's going on. So let me just take a moment, right? This is the fun part. I think you're going to like this. Let's do a little exercise that we pilots call SA, or situational awareness, right? Try this exercise while you're here this week, right? Just try this out. A little self-actualization here for a second. Take a moment during the conference to sit back and observe not only others, but detach and look at yourself, right? And when you do, and consider where you are on this human timeline that I just mentioned, and what stands before you in terms of the challenges and opportunities, I think you're going to realize you're living in a remarkable time in history. The possibilities of harnessing new technologies, particularly aerospace technology, for the benefit of humankind is becoming more and more of a reality. I mean, if that doesn't excite you, if that doesn't get the kids excited, when they see what that really truly means and how that's going to transform their lives, what an exciting time. I mean, I just gave myself goosebumps. I don't know if you need to stand up? No, because if you're not feeling that, you really should. This is really, when I wake up in the morning, I am so excited about this particular subject. So now I will say this, challenges are great. We'll talk about some of those. The challenges are really great, but that's what makes it great, right? But the opportunities are far greater, far greater. And opportunity is where we want to focus, of course, right? So I'm here to tell you that, and share with you what we've already learned. Unlike those courageous pioneering pilots that I told you, half of which died in accidents, here's your opportunity. Here's our opportunity. We got a chance to do it right the first time on this one. We have a chance to do this right the first time. And so commercial spacecraft, right, and that many of you design, and space flights that you conduct, transit the U.S. national airspace as the first step in climbing into orbit, right? I mean, they have to pass through the airspace. I'm here to tell you that airspace, whether it's a vertical launch where it's seconds and they're already in orbit, right? Or it's a, captured carry kind of horizontal launch, you're traveling through the airspace. But I'm here to tell you, that's the safest airspace in this country ever in the history of the world. There is no safer airspace in the world than what we have here in the United States. But we consciously made it that way. And we made it that way in what I you've heard pilots say from time to time, I'm sure, in rules written in blood. Usually takes, unfortunately, something to happen for rules to change. And I think we could save ourselves from a lot of that pain. But having said that, I'm happy to say airline pilots are rooting for your success, for commercial space success, totally. And we have one reason, because your experience will benefit us as well, right? We will learn from one another. But on the other hand, too, we can let you know what we've learned. Remember, our industry isn't very much different. In fact, you're kind of an outgrowth of that industry, right? Think about the personalities of the CEOs in the early years of aviation development and compare them to the CEOs today. It's not very much different. Think about the competitiveness and the need to seize markets and get a foothold, and just the fantastic amount of technologies that go in. Very, very, very similar. So I think that at the Airline Pilots Association, we can help share some of our previous experiences and maybe avoid some of the hardships that we've had to face. Now, what we want, truly, is both in commercial aviation and in commercial space to continue to change the way we see the world and our universe. I feel certain, and I know that everybody in here shares that, because the fine gentleman before me just said that a little while ago. So how has the United States accomplished this phenomenal, and I say phenomenal, level of aviation safety? By collecting and analyzing data. That's how we did it. Using a data-driven approach to identify risk and then addressing it. And remember, folks, the safety record that I'm about to tell you about involves putting people in metal composite tubes in the lower stratosphere. We're not talking about putting people in a bus or a car or a train. To have achieved the safety levels I'm about to mention are actually phenomenal, really, in terms of human achievement. Now, in the mid-1990s, the industry's safety record, at that time, not too good, 2 accidents in particular, led to the creation of the FAA's Commercial Air Safety Team in 1997, and later, the implementation of a new program called the SIAS, Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing Program. Amazing program, over 150 data streams coming over to MITRE to analyze, and the algorithm is just an amazing thing to watch, how they build these various algorithms, and actually have moved from a forensic approach to accident investigation, where we used to wait, something would happen, we would do the investigation, and then try to figure out how not to have that happen again. Now, we've reached a capability where it's risk predictive. It's amazing. Both are collaborative efforts, too, I might say, SIAS and CAST, with labor, airlines, manufacturers, industry trade groups, and the regulator, of course, the FAA, who came together to address the risks. Their target, and here it was, the target was reduce the fatal accident rate by 80% in 10 years. It's a rather audacious, bold target. Well, I'm here to tell you, they not only met the 80% through this program, they exceeded it. They hit it by 83%. And today, we're sitting at 91%. We moved over 2/3 of the world's population in those little tubes I told you about in the lower stratosphere with that kind of safety record. And that wasn't happenstance. That came from a dedicated effort at analyzing data. A remarkable human achievement by any means. But there was more to the story. There was much more to the story. Because later on, when 4 fatal accidents occurred in the United States over a 6-year period, culminating, and I'm sure everybody remembers this one, Colgan 3407 in New York, in 2009, Congress acted to make flying safer again. Again, written in blood, unfortunately. Motivated everybody to say, well, what was the problem? Well, our nation's lawmakers addressed the tragedy by, we had a little painful internal process going amongst ourselves as pilots. One of the things we're not shy about is criticizing ourselves. You can't criticize us. We do enough of it on our own. Whatever you say to us, we're going to do it 100 times over. That's what makes us professionals, right? Because failure in our line of work usually has some pretty strong consequences, rather. So the FAA worked together with us, and we looked at those 4 accidents and several others and found that there were shortcomings in airline pilot experience, qualification and training, and basically took a look at ourselves. And we essentially, by doing that, completed the circle. So we had the data now, right? But what we needed to do was address what was happening. Now, I can give you a lot of excuses as to why that happens. You know, in the tremendous growth that happened in the airline industry, there was a push to get people in the cockpits, get them in there, you know? There's a big difference than training that I received both in the Marine Corps and in the airlines, you know, where I went through months and months and months of training, right, after I was already a pilot, right, a certified pilot. And to giving somebody ground school at the Holiday Inn across the street from the airport, and 200 hours later you're flying your families around. No on-the-job training for us. We don't like that, right? So we put finishing touches on the system, here's the amazing part about it. Think about all the stakeholders and all that goes in to that risk predictive model that I just told you about. Multiple moving parts, the likes of which, when you think of the complexity of the airspace that we fly in, right? That elegant model, it ends up being a whole greater than the sum of its parts. And, I mean, we're talking about a synergy here unlike anything that's ever been done in human history. And as a Marine, we like to call it a force multiplier, all right? When you take those varying data points, put them together, you get that push, that boost, right? So the set of FAA regulations that came out of that in 2010 resulted in the laws passed and involved the training of pilots receiving in important areas like updating pilot certificates and type rating requirements, and improvements in the number of hours, a credit hour scheme that looked at how many hours pilots fly and gave certain amounts of credit towards that in terms of their proficiency. And then the law also improved the flight time, duty time thing I told you with the establishment of Federal Aviation Regulation 117, which puts finally science-based rules. I mean, if you've ever flown around the globe, you know what you feel like, right? There's circadian disruptions. And finally put it in, and we had it in cargo again, and we lost it. So we'll get it back. So we saw risk, we identified it, and I'm happy to say that the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act were a lot of strong safety features in that and backed up what was done back in 2010. So we saved, even though there were a lot of people trying to pull back, you know, we're trying to push back those safety regulations because they claimed there was a pilot shortage. It wasn't a pilot shortage, really. It was an unsustainable career pattern, you know. People have to want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on an education and actually have the prospect of having a career. So we're addressing it in a different way, and it's been working. So our position at ALPA is that the most important safety feature on any aircraft is an experienced, well-trained, well-rested flight crew. No doubt about it. I mean, when we fly, you know, when we say, is it safe, Joe? Is it safe? You know, during the government shutdown, is it safe? I went on CNN. I tried to describe what that means. It's not a monolithic term. There's an envelope, we call it, right? The pilots always talk about an envelope. We try to stay in that envelope. You know, there's acceptable levels of risks in that envelope. We like to be at the top of the envelope, maybe at the middle, but never at the bottom, right? And that shutdown was getting us closer towards the bottom. But, you know, sometimes pilots fall outside the envelope, and through no fault of our own. Think of a gentleman by the name of Sully Sullenberger. He was outside the envelope, all right? That was not a scenario that a machine, I guess in some form of artificial intelligence someday would have made that determination that I probably couldn't make that piece of concrete and I have to put it down in the river, in the East River. So my point is we play an integral role in the safety of what I've been talking about. So the result, since 2009, we've literally reached the highest levels of safety ever known. This same risk predictive data-driven approach holds true for airline pilots on every individual flight, as well as the air transportation system itself across this great country. It's embodied in the very fabric of that remarkable safety record I just mentioned, a safety record that has helped make commercial aviation a significant economic driver in the United States. And think about it this way, safe flying, we're doing anything safe. It leads to a strong aviation or aerospace industry, and a strong aviation or aerospace industry contributes to a solid economy. In our end of the business, we always quote $1.5 trillion and 5% of GDP. I think you saw when the system began to break down during that longest government shutdown we've ever experienced in the history of the United States, it started to affect more than just aviation. You know, businesses were feeling the pinch. They started to feel the pinch. And that's when things changed. So, now, I said earlier that we have the time to do it right this time, right? As airline pilots, we recognize that taking the time necessary when it comes to ensuring the safety of our passengers, crew, and cargo, on individual flights, we know that the workload changes all the time, right? So we know that sometimes time is on our side. We don't need to rush to do something. Rushing usually leads to something bad. Now, there are immediate things that can happen that require, you know, and we're trained for those immediate things where no time for impulse, immediate action is required. And we call them immediate action items. But most of the time, we do what we call winding the watch. When we see something come up in the cockpit, if the airplane's still flying and it's safe, sit back for a second, take it all in. You don't want to make a mistake at that point. So we call it winding the watch, where you sit back and you begin to analyze it. So whether it was me flying as a Marine or, you know, with FedEx over the years, more time meant more opportunity to gather data, right, and respond to that data in an appropriate way. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the good news of what frames the importance of this discussion here for us today and for you this week. We have time and opportunity to ensure we safely integrate commercial space operations with commercial aviation, something I firmly believe that we can do through that sharing process, that collaborative process I just mentioned. With commercial space, we have the chance, again, to do it right. Now, last May, you heard that I attended the ComStack meeting and Commercial Space Transportation Advisory Committee, and I just came as an observer. I'm always interested in things all the conferences going on that deal with safety. And so the main thing I wanted to do, I really wanted to just listen. I wanted to listen to the ComStack talk amongst itself, and I tried to hear, I tried to hear what the issues were, and it was clear to me that there didn't seem to be a dialogue going on between. They talked about the frustration with, some of the complaints that were coming in with that airlines were making about the delays that were associated with space launches and things of that nature. But I noticed there was no commercial aviation interaction or assistance to say, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Let's work on this. Let's all work on this together. And so when the opportunity came, I grabbed the microphone, and never, ever am I shy to share my opinions with anybody. But I said, hey, would it be helpful? Would it be helpful if we all got in the same room and actually talked about this together? Why don't we get all the minds, all the leaders of the commercial aviation industry with all the movers and shakers in the commercial space and get in a room, talk about it. That's how actually the commercial air safety team was able to do those things. I don't know if you remember the Associate Administrator for Aviation Safety at the FAA, Peggy Gilligan. She told me the story. She got them all in a room. She locked the door and said, no one leaves until we figure this out. And you think about all the competitiveness and things that were going on at the time. It was a remarkable feat. But here's the secret. The Airline Pilots Association, if you want success, we don't compete on safety. We collaborate on it. It's as simple as that. We understand the competitive challenges. Oh, certainly. But there's a way to do it. And we've found that way. And we know we can share with you. So I made it clear, there that the most important thing we can do is not talk, but listen to one another. Hear one another what our challenges are. And I believe that the future growth and success of commercial aviation and space operation depends on safe and efficient access to the same shared public resource, the National Airspace System, right, that you've been talking about. In the context of the important discussion we're having over the next few days, or that you're going to have over the next few days, let me give you ALPA's perspective on some of the principles that we feel could be helpful and should shape the dialogue. It's just us. And so number one, the U.S. National Airspace System is a national resource to be managed to the benefit of all Americans. Pretty much I think everybody would agree to that. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It doesn't belong to commercial space or commercial. It's a shared resource. In the long term, ALPA supports integration rather than segregation. Okay? So this gets into the whole, for you engineers out there, the 10 to the minus 9 in terms of risk reliability right now versus the 10 to the minus 6 that you hear bounced around. That's the challenge, right? Is how do we do that? Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, watching the FAA, we got FAA folks in here? You got, I think we had a couple. Great. So I've been talking to Dan Elwell about some of these issues, you know. And it would be nice, you know, to develop a set of tools, right, to where we can, once a launch takes place, to basically open the airspace up, and then as it, you know, as the risk model changes, as it goes on with its trajectory, that closes up behind it. And instead of just a blunt, let's close off the airspace, right? And that's easy to say, hard to do, and it takes dollars. So my thought is that if you look at the AST, right, the FAA's Commercial Air Transportation Group, that 98 people and $20 million probably ain't going to make it, all right, to solve those kind of problems. You all heard about SDI, right, the Space Data Integrator tool that's available. But right now, Space Data Integrator, the information, the good information that comes off that has to be manually run across the room and put into the ERAM that the FAA folks use, the controllers use, right? The en route automated system that they have now. So we need to fix that. That's an immediate thing. I'm looking for low-hanging fruit. I'm saying, what can we do now with what we have to improve the situation? Because ultimately, inevitable. As we have increased frequency, we're going to run into this issue and we're going to have to solve it. So I say we get a head start on it. Number 3, spacecraft and their operations must meet the same level of safety as other design users. And that's hard to do as well, because we need design and certification specifics and performance standards, right? Those kinds of things. And we can't stop, folks, we can't allow these government shutdowns to keep happening. How do you run a system like we do in Next Gen, right? Next generation, where we're shifting from a ground-based nav to a satellite-based nav. How do we do that when we're starting and stopping? How do you conduct your business in commercial space if we shut the government down and start it up again? I mean, in the end, it costs more money, it's hugely inefficient, and it's dangerous sometimes. So we can't afford to add that type of unquantified risk that happens during the government shutdowns. And am I doing okay on time? I'm getting a little long. I'm sorry, I'm going to move it along. And then number 5, stakeholder collaboration, the big thing, right? Planning and analysis that informs new policies, procedures, and regulations should begin now. Because again, it's just inevitable. As the your capabilities increase, we're going to have to talk about it. And I want to join you in that discussion, and I want to help. So based on these principles, ALPA has taken the lead in bringing commercial space and commercial aviation community representatives together. And that's what we're here doing today. We think it's important to share the best practices that we've learned in commercial aviation, and many of which were learned as a result of accidents and loss of life. So we don't have to, you don't have to do what we've done. So ALPA has decades of experience with collaboration. Decades of experience with collaboration. Did I mention we're a labor union? Okay, so collaboration and unity building, hello, that's our bailiwick, right? Unity and collaboration is what we do as an organization. In fact, it's our greatest strength. It is truly our greatest strength. Think about trying to get together 61,000 pilots at 33, oh, okay? All right. Somebody fell there. Okay, 2 minutes, okay. So think about having 61,000 Type A pilots and the challenge that is to get everybody on the same page. We have a governing bodies process that'll make your eyes water, makes Congress look silly. But we make a conscious choice to focus on commonalities versus differences. And I think we can all do that here. You've got to see what we have in common first and then build on that. Build together. There may be times when we just can't meet minds, and we'll figure out a way to deal with it. We'll build some bridges, right? So we have some good examples on how to proceed, including the commercial air safety team structure that I just mentioned. And again, these programs all bring stakeholders together to the same table, along with the FAA, to identify solutions that are consensus-based. The CAS model uses data to develop, as I just said, with those data streams. But they do it to identify and stop top safety areas through analysis and past accidents and incidents, like I told you. A charter joint teams, which I think is really fad, and they come together and look at risk from different perspectives, right? And they look at all the individual benign data points that might combine in crazy ways that make them not benign. Again, a shift from the forensic approach to one that's more risk predictive. And then they look at all that and they develop safety enhancements, right? Effective interventions, basically, for those types of problems that they find out. And then the most important thing, they track the implementation of these critical interventions to ensure they achieve the desired safety result. We believe that a similar risk approach risk predictive approach will be essential for our industries as we work to integrate spaceflight into commercial aviation. Our work through the CAS is just one example of ALPA's 88 years of collaboration. And the safety programs and technologies that ALPA has helped develop and implement for commercial aviation have already gone to space, literally. And I say that because recently I met with Don Thoma, he's the CEO of Aeronautical, to talk about the latest developments in the company's efforts to deploy a global satellite-based automatic dependent surveillance broadcast system known as ADSB. You all know what ADSB is, right? It's kind of a replacement for how we do things with radar. The global tracking of ADSB-equipped aircraft, you know it's going to be a giant leap for controlling airspace and helping move airplanes around when there are launches, and also when airplanes are in distress. So just last month, Don came to my office and he presented me with a framed copy of an engraved plaque that is attached to one of the ADSB transceivers on an Iridium satellite in recognition of ALPA's partnership. I mean, I was really taken aback by it. To me, it was a perfect reminder of the power of partnership and the importance of gift giving, I might say. He's a fine gentleman. It was a really nice gift. And it represents a commitment to collaboration that I see unfolding right here between commercial aviation and commercial space. So commercial space, again, not new, but it's changing, and it is changing fast. We have new types of operations, increased frequencies, and more spaceports being developed as we speak. So as the U.S. airline industry works to meet future passenger and shipper demand, and while spaceflight operations also increase, the aerospace industry must work together jointly to create policies, regulations, and procedures that share the resource efficiently and safely. So in just a few minutes, you'll hear from one of the folks from our air safety organization, First Officer Steve Bowen. He's our ALPA subject matter expert on commercial space, and he'll share in greater detail our specific recommendations for safe and efficient operations of both industries from the perspective of ALPA Air Safety Organization, the largest non-governmental safety organization in the world. We're fully committed to fostering the constructive dialogue that I talked about and creating the solutions that will meet both industries' goals. And we've testified before Congress about this as well, about safely integrating commercial space operations into the national airspace, and underscored that safety should be the primary concern. As a first step, commercial airline and space operators need to better understand one another's operations. So in September 2018, ALPA convened a stakeholder group that I told you about earlier, where we got everybody in one room. And I want to do that again coming up here in May. So I'd like to have a public meeting with everybody in the room and see if we can move this ball further downfield. As I mentioned, we have the benefit of time, but there is a certain degree of urgency to our effort here today. New opportunities coming fast, whether it's NASA's plans this year to launch astronauts finally, again, from U.S. soil, and Virgin Galactic space tourism operations, or the continued development of Blue Origin's rocket, the New Glenn. So, as Glenn reported, my buddy John again, the most important thing we can do is inspire young minds to advance the kind of science, math, and technology education that will help youngsters take us to the next phase of space travel. The STEM subject, right? The importance of STEM. I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with Secretary Chow in her office. She is really supportive of the whole STEM effort. So I feel especially pleased to participate in this conference, hosted by two prestigious educational institutions, Embry-Riddle and the University of Texas, Austin. And I thank you all for allowing me to come here and speak with you today. I think there's no greater group together. I think this will come down as a seminal event, and we will continue to make change. I know there's many people out there today, many younger folks are looking at space travel. It's funny, we had a magazine article right now that's looking at, they asked me what my bucket list was. I said, fly a small airplane with no navigational capabilities whatsoever with a small wet compass and follow railroads across this country. That's a bucket list item for me. As well as fly a spacecraft, which unfortunately I probably won't be able to get to do. But, so ALPA is committed to the future of the piloting profession, whether it be in aircraft or spacecraft. So it's an exciting time to be part of the aerospace industry. As a pilot who loves to fly, I'm eager to see where the future takes us, and as president of ALPA, I am confident that the aerospace industry can work together to achieve the high level of safety that the American people expect and demand from U.S. air transportation. I had to rush a little bit towards the end there because I know I took up a little bit of your time. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak with you today. I'll be glad to take a question or two. Thank you.